Don't skip. Have you ever wondered why, despite our best intentions, conversations sometimes just fall apart? Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." But so often, it feels like the words and misunderstandings of others have power over us. How often have small communication errors led to conflicts or missed opportunities? In this video, we're diving deep into the most common communication mistakes that we all make without even realizing it. And more importantly, how to fix them in a way that brings peace, clarity, and stronger connections. From active listening to mastering nonverbal cues, each part of this journey will bring you closer to the kind of communication that builds trust and understanding. If you're ready to transform the way you connect with others, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official. Let's make every conversation a step toward a genuine connection. Number 1. Over-talking or interrupting. There's a natural urge in us to fill silence. Maybe it's the discomfort of not knowing what the other person is thinking, or just the desire to make our voice heard. But over-talking, constantly filling that space with our own words, can quietly undermine the very thing we hope to achieve in conversation, true connection. Seneca reminds us, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Yet, it's so easy to forget. When we dominate a conversation or interrupt, we're effectively blocking the flow of mutual respect and understanding. It's like saying, even unconsciously, that our thoughts are more important than theirs. This habit, often small and unintentional, can lead to misunderstandings, misjudgments, and over time, a lack of trust. Think about it. How often have you felt ignored or frustrated when someone talks over you? That feeling reflects back on us when we do the same to others. Interrupting others can come across as though we're not actively listening, or as if we're waiting to offer our perspective without giving the other person space to share theirs. Good communication, especially when we're in close relationships, relies on balance. It's about creating a safe space where each person feels valued and understood. Over time, conversations that are one-sided erode that sense of safety and respect, making people hesitant to open up in the future. The Stoics teach us to pause and reflect on the purpose behind our words before we speak. This is where active listening, one of the simplest yet most powerful skills, comes into play. When we listen actively, we're not just waiting for our turn to speak. Instead, we're fully present, picking up on both the words and the unspoken emotions behind them. This deepens the connection, showing others that their thoughts and feelings are just as valuable as ours. So how can we catch ourselves when we're over-talking or interrupting? Start by practicing silence, even if it feels uncomfortable. Silence isn't emptiness. It's a space where reflection and understanding can grow. Next time you feel the urge to interrupt, pause. Give the other person a moment to finish their thought and then respond with understanding. Phrases like, "I hear you," or "I see where you're coming from," go a long way in making people feel genuinely heard. If we can train ourselves to listen without thinking of a reply, we become better at understanding. And understanding is the foundation of real, meaningful communication. It helps us avoid conflicts, misunderstandings, and even emotional manipulation because we're aware and tuned in. Remember, true wisdom in conversation isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating a space where both voices matter. As we go through this journey of communication mastery, keep in mind that silence can speak as loudly as words. So let's start using it wisely. Number 2, not listening actively. How often do we find ourselves in conversations, yet our minds are somewhere else? Maybe we're thinking about what to say next or planning our next move. But here's the truth. If we're not fully present, we're not listening. And if we're not listening, we're missing out on understanding the other person. The Stoics, in their wisdom, remind us that true communication begins with listening, not speaking. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more than we speak." Not listening actively is one of the biggest mistakes we can make in any conversation. It's easy to fall into the trap of hearing the words without truly processing them. But listening isn't just about hearing. It's about paying attention with intention. It's about understanding the person as a whole, beyond the words they say. When we don't listen actively, we not only miss vital information, but also diminish the quality of our relationships. Think about it. How do you feel when someone's not truly listening to you? Frustrated, maybe even unheard. That's because we all have a basic need to be understood. Active listening is a fundamental act of respect, and without it, conversations become shallow and connections become weak. The Stoics understood this concept deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." This means we should hold ourselves accountable in our interactions, making sure we are truly present with the other person. Active listening requires focus, and focus requires us to silence the distractions in our minds and in our environment. So what does active listening actually look like? It's more than just nodding or giving occasional verbal cues like "uh-huh" or "I see." Active listening involves making eye contact, showing interest through body language, and asking clarifying questions to ensure you've understood correctly. It's about being mindful, not just of the words, but also of the feelings and intentions behind those words. It's about staying open and engaged, not just waiting for your turn to speak. When we listen actively, we are making an effort to connect, not just to respond, and this connection fosters trust and respect. We show the other person that their thoughts matter. This is crucial for navigating any relationship, whether personal or professional, and it can help us avoid miscommunication, misunderstandings, and even conflict. Moreover, active listening allows us to engage more effectively in conflict resolution and negotiation. When we understand the other person's perspective clearly, we can respond in a way that is thoughtful and constructive, rather than reacting out of frustration or defensiveness. So, how can we practice active listening? The first step is simple. When someone is speaking, truly listen. Let go of your internal distractions and give them your full attention. Don't interrupt. Don't plan your response while they're talking. Instead, focus on understanding. Ask questions if something isn't clear. Reflect back on what you've heard to ensure you understood correctly. And above all, listen with empathy. Active listening is a skill we can all improve. And when we do, our conversations will become richer, our relationships stronger, and our lives more harmonious. The Stoics teach us that listening well is one of the most powerful tools we have in creating meaningful communication. Number 3. Assuming instead of clarifying. How often do we jump to conclusions? We hear a few words, and in our minds we already know exactly what the other person meant. But here's the problem. Assumptions often lead us astray. Instead of clarifying, we let our biases and past experiences shape our understanding. The Stoics remind us of the importance of reason and self-awareness in our communication. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact." When we assume, we allow our perception to cloud the truth. The risk of this is enormous. It not only distorts the conversation, but also strains our relationships. By assuming, we create misunderstandings that could easily have been avoided with a simple clarification. We rob ourselves of the chance to understand the other person fully. In fact, assuming can lead to a breakdown in trust, as the other person feels misunderstood or ignored. The Stoic approach to communication, however, teaches us to resist this impulse. Epictetus advised, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When we assume, we react prematurely, instead of taking the time to understand the situation fully. This often leads to conflict or frustration, both of which could have been avoided through clarity. Think about the last time you assumed something in a conversation. Perhaps you thought someone was angry with you based on their tone, only to later find out that they were simply stressed. Or maybe you misinterpreted a comment and responded defensively. These scenarios are common because assumptions often fill the gaps in our understanding, but they are rarely accurate. The key here is to clarify. Instead of jumping to conclusions, ask questions, confirm what you've heard, clarify what you've understood. By doing so, we not only prevent misunderstandings but also deepen our connection with the other person. We show that we care enough to get it right, and that we respect their perspective enough to ask for clarity. Clarification doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as saying, "Just to make sure I understand, are you saying?" Or, "Can you explain what you mean by that?" These questions open up the space for further dialogue, and they invite the other person to share more, offering us a clearer picture of their thoughts. In fact, Clarifying allows us to engage in more meaningful conversations. Instead of reacting, we respond based on true understanding. This is especially important in conflict resolution and negotiation. When we take the time to clarify, instead of assuming, we are more likely to find common ground and work toward solutions that benefit everyone involved. The Stoics believed that clear thinking and reflection were crucial to living a good life. By resisting assumptions and embracing clarification, we practice these principles. We improve our communication, avoid unnecessary conflict, and build stronger relationships based on trust and understanding. So the next time you find yourself assuming, take a step back, clarify, ask, listen, seek the truth. In doing so, you will not only become a better communicator, but also cultivate more meaningful, respectful, and harmonious interactions with others. Number 4. Using a defensive tone. Have you ever been in a conversation where you felt immediately attacked? Perhaps someone criticized you, and instinctively you responded by defending yourself, even if the other person wasn't attacking you at all. It's a natural reaction, but as the Stoics remind us, it's one that often works against us. In the heat of a discussion, we might find ourselves slipping into a defensive tone, feeling the need to protect our ego. But here's the problem. When we respond defensively, we shut down the conversation. We block the opportunity for growth, understanding, and genuine connection. The Stoics, particularly Seneca, warned us about the dangers of being ruled by our emotions. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A defensive tone rooted in insecurity or pride reflects a loss of control. When we become defensive, we often stop listening. We start focusing on how to rebut or justify our actions, rather than understanding the other person's point of view. This can lead to an escalation of conflict, where both parties dig in their heels, creating further distance. The defensive tone might feel like protection, but it is actually a barrier between us and the possibility of resolution. Think about it. When someone approaches us with feedback or criticism, what's the first instinct? To explain ourselves, to clarify that we didn't mean it that way, or to justify our actions. But what if instead of rushing to defend ourselves, we paused and listened? What if we took a moment to truly understand the other person's perspective? This is where the Stoic principle of detachment comes in. Marcus Aurelius taught, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." If we can detach from the emotional need to defend ourselves, we open ourselves to more constructive communication. Instead of reacting, we can respond thoughtfully. When we take the defensive approach, we focus on proving our own worth or rightness. However, the Stoics remind us that life is not about being right, but about being virtuous. Instead of defending our ego, we should ask ourselves, what can I learn from this moment? How can I improve through this exchange? One way to counteract a defensive tone is to practice humility. Instead of reacting with a ready defense, try to respond with curiosity and openness. Ask questions, seek clarification. Allow the other person to express themselves fully without interruption. In doing so, you not only foster a more respectful conversation, but you also show strength in your ability to listen and learn, rather than react from a place of insecurity. Think about how much smoother discussions would go if we embraced this Stoic approach. Instead of meeting criticism with defense, we meet it with understanding. Instead of digging into our position, we lean into the opportunity for growth. In conclusion, the next time you feel the urge to respond defensively, take a step back. Breathe. Remember that you have the power to control your reactions. Embrace the Stoic idea that your peace of mind is not dependent on external events, but on your ability to respond with grace and wisdom. Number 5. Ignoring body language. Think about the last time you had an important conversation. Was your body language in sync with your words? Or were you perhaps unknowingly sending mixed signals? The Stoics believed in the power of being mindful and intentional in all actions, including how we communicate non-verbally. As Epictetus taught, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But what about what we're not saying? How often do we truly pay attention to our posture, our gestures, our facial expressions? Our body language speaks volumes, often more than our words. In fact, research suggests that over 70% of communication is nonverbal. Yet, many of us overlook it. We get caught up in what we're saying, how we're articulating our thoughts, and forget to consider how we're presenting ourselves physically. This is a mistake, one that the Stoics would warn against. Communication is not just about speaking clearly. It's about expressing our true intentions through both words and actions. Imagine this. You're having a conversation with someone, and you're fully engaged in explaining your point, but your arms are crossed, your posture is tense, and your eyes are avoiding contact. What message are you sending? That you're closed off, defensive, or uninterested? Even if your words convey openness and understanding, your body language could be telling a completely different story. As Marcus Aurelius advised, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. When we ignore body language, we are in essence performing a disservice to the conversation. Body language can reveal not only how we feel, but how we perceive others. When we're defensive, our body tenses. When we're relaxed and open, we lean in, make eye contact, and open our posture. These cues tell the other person how we feel about the interaction. And just like the Stoic practice of mindfulness in our thoughts and emotions, we must also practice mindfulness in our physical presence. Why does this matter? Because without being aware of how we communicate nonverbally, we risk creating misunderstandings. A gesture or posture may contradict what we say, leaving the other person confused or disconnected. This leads to a breakdown in trust. For example, if you say you're interested in someone's opinion, but look at your phone while they speak, that's a clear signal that you're not fully present. Stoic wisdom calls for clarity and integrity, both in speech and action. So, what can we do to correct this? Start by becoming aware of your own body language. When you communicate, pay attention to how you're sitting or standing. Are you tense, defensive, or relaxed? Are you making eye contact, or are you looking away? Practice the open body language. Uncross your arms, face the person fully, and give them your full attention. These small actions speak louder than any words you can say. As you engage in conversations, remember that your words are only part of the story. The way you express yourself physically can either strengthen your message or undermine it. In every interaction, you have the power to align your words with your body language, creating a more authentic and impactful exchange. Number 6. Failing to set boundaries. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt overwhelmed, stressed, or taken advantage of in a conversation? Or perhaps you've left a discussion feeling drained, wondering why you agreed to things that didn't sit right with you. If so, you're not alone. This is a common mistake many make. Failing to set clear boundaries in communication. The Stoics believed in the importance of self-control and wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, spoke of not letting others disrupt our peace. He said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." But this doesn't only apply to thoughts. It extends to our interactions too. When we don't establish boundaries in communication, we allow others to dictate the course of the conversation, often at the cost of our own well-being. Boundaries are a crucial part of effective communication. They protect our emotional space and prevent others from overstepping. When we fail to set these limits, we end up in conversations where we feel disrespected, manipulated, or unheard. We become passive participants in our own exchanges. Let's take a step back and think about it. Boundaries are not about shutting people out or being defensive. They are about creating a space where both parties can speak freely, but in a way that respects each other's needs. It's about knowing what's acceptable and what's not. For example, if someone constantly interrupts you or speaks over you, setting a boundary means calmly but firmly stating that you deserve to finish your thoughts before they speak. This simple act of asserting yourself is a reflection of Stoic wisdom, acting with purpose and not letting emotions dictate your response. When you fail to set boundaries, you're not being kind to yourself. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control other people's actions, but we can control how we react. By not setting boundaries, we allow others to dictate our reactions. This leads to frustration, resentment, and ultimately a breakdown in communication. How do we correct this mistake? The first step is awareness. Recognize when your boundaries are being tested. Are you being asked to do something that feels uncomfortable or unreasonable? Are you being interrupted repeatedly? In those moments, don't hesitate to assert your boundaries. It can be as simple as saying, "I need a moment to finish my thought," or "I'm not comfortable discussing this right now." The key is to do so with calm and clarity, without aggression or defensiveness. It's important to remember that setting boundaries doesn't mean you're being difficult or rude. It means you value yourself and your well-being enough to ensure that communication remains respectful and constructive. Just as Epictetus advised us to focus on what we can control, we must also take charge of our emotional space by setting clear and firm boundaries. By doing so, you create a healthier communication environment, one where both parties can listen, understand, and engage without crossing into unhealthy territory. Boundaries are not walls. They are the framework that allows for meaningful, respectful, and effective conversations. Number 7. Not knowing when to use silence. Have you ever found yourself in a heated discussion, eager to respond, only to realize afterward that you said things you didn't mean? Or perhaps you've stayed silent, but it left you feeling misunderstood or disconnected. Silence is powerful, but only when used wisely. The mistake many people make is not knowing when to embrace silence when holding back could have served them far better. The Stoics understood the profound strength of silence. Epictetus, for example, frequently spoke of choosing our words carefully, emphasizing that the wise person knows not just what to say, but also when to stay silent. He believed that speech should be purposeful, and words should be used to foster understanding, not to fuel conflict. Silence is not the absence of communication, but a form of it. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with noise, silence can be the most powerful tool in a conversation. The Stoics taught that not all situations call for a response. Sometimes pausing and reflecting before speaking can provide greater clarity and control. When we fail to recognize when silence is needed, we often fall into the trap of over-explaining, defending ourselves, or saying things we regret. In these moments, the absence of words speaks louder than anything we could say. It offers time to compose ourselves, to think, and to assess whether our words will bring peace or further conflict. Think about a time when silence could have been the best response. Perhaps someone made an accusation, or you felt cornered in a conversation. The immediate urge might be to defend yourself or explain. But in those moments, choosing silence allows you to avoid being reactive. It gives you space to maintain your composure and think through your response, if one is even necessary. The Stoic approach is simple. Don't rush to speak out of impulse. Instead, let the silence be a signal that you are considering the best course of action. It's not about avoiding communication, but about knowing when speaking is futile or when your words could inflame the situation. Take a moment to reflect. If you always respond immediately, ask yourself if you're doing so from a place of wisdom or simply from emotion. Could your words be adding fuel to the fire? Are you truly listening, or are you focused on what you will say next? Silence allows you to listen more deeply and understand the other person's point of view, even when it's challenging. Knowing when to use silence can transform your relationships. It shows that you value the situation and respect the other person's perspective. Just as a Stoic would pause and reflect before speaking, you too can choose silence as a tool for clarity, peace, and self-mastery. In these quiet moments, we can avoid unnecessary conflict and choose our words with intention. As Seneca said, silence is a lesson learned from the many suffering from stupid actions. In conclusion, silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom in action. Knowing when to be silent can be just as powerful, if not more so, than knowing when to speak. Number 8. Not following through with commitments. One of the gravest errors in communication and in life itself is failing to follow through with commitments. How often have we promised someone something, be it a friend, colleague, or loved one, only to forget, procrastinate, or simply not deliver? In those moments, the damage isn't just in the unfulfilled promise, but in the trust that erodes over time. The Stoics understood that our word is our bond. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, often reflected on the importance of integrity. He believed that being a person of your word wasn't just a matter of social duty. It was a matter of personal discipline. To make a promise and fail to follow through was, to the Stoic, an act of weakness. It signals a lack of self-mastery and an inability to live in harmony with one's own values. When we don't follow through with commitments, we undermine our own sense of integrity. We teach ourselves and others that our promises are fleeting and unreliable. This breeds frustration, disappointment, and ultimately disconnection. It's not just about others losing trust in us, it's also about losing trust in ourselves. After all, if we can't rely on our own words, what is left? Commitment requires more than intention. It demands action. The Stoics emphasize that actions, not words, define who we are. Saying something and not doing it doesn't just affect others. It diminishes our own character. Think about the last time you made a commitment, whether big or small. Did you follow through? Did you honor your word? Or did you let life, distractions, or laziness take precedence? The truth is that life will always present obstacles, and it will always tempt us to avoid discomfort. But part of being a Stoic is recognizing that our actions must align with our principles, no matter the circumstances. Seneca once said, "What we do now echoes in eternity." This means that our actions, especially those concerning our promises, have long-term consequences. To avoid this mistake, we must cultivate the discipline to act on our commitments, even when it's inconvenient. It's crucial to reflect. When you fail to follow through, what do you sacrifice? Is it just the task at hand? Or is it your self-respect, your reputation, or your relationships? A broken promise may seem like a small thing, but over time it accumulates. One failure leads to another, and before long you may find yourself caught in a cycle of unreliability, creating emotional chaos and disappointment for everyone involved. As you consider the commitments you've made, ask yourself, are you acting with intention and consistency? Are you following through on your promises, even when it's challenging? Don't let the mistake of neglecting your word become a habit. If we want to live with integrity and lead fulfilling relationships, we must be committed to honoring our promises. That is the Stoic way. In the end, it's simple. Honor your word and honor yourself. Only through consistent action can we earn the trust of others, and more importantly, ourselves. As we've discussed today, the Stoic way offers powerful insights into improving our communication and relationships. Avoiding these common mistakes, like not listening actively, assuming instead of clarifying, and failing to follow through on commitments, helps us build stronger, more authentic connections with those around us. Remember, true communication is not just about words, but about our actions and intentions. We must be mindful of how we engage with others and ourselves, always striving for clarity, integrity, and respect. The Stoics remind us that our actions speak louder than our words, and our relationships are reflections of who we are at our core. I encourage you to take action right now. Reflect on your recent conversations and relationships. Are you making these mistakes? Start practicing more active listening and clarify your intentions before speaking. Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts or experiences. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official for more valuable insights. Stay tuned for the next video. There's even more wisdom to explore.